Ed Czerwien with the USDA in Amarillo, Texas, with the weekly box beef recap for week ending June 1st. The comprehensive choice cutout, which is the weekly average of all types of sales, including the spot trade, formula trade, export sales, and outfront sales, was at 206.74, which was 63 cents higher than last week. Obviously, there was a lot of pent-up demand for the first big grilling holiday to see such an enormous rally the last few weeks. The total reported box beef volume was 6,713 loads, which was 303 loads less than last week. The formula trade was 3,602 loads for the week, which was 247 loads more than last week, and about 54% of the total sales. The daily spot choice box beef cutout, which we watch each and every day, ended the last week at 206.65 after peaking over 211. Daily volume was light again, and that makes 5 weeks in a row with this weekly total in the 700 load range, which is only about 9 to 12% of the total sales. The importance of the high percentage of formula sales and their stabilizing effect becomes more evident when we see these sharp drops or wide swings in that spot trade. The outfront sales were 860 loads, which was 468 loads less than last week. Outfront sales correspond to product that is bought but does not actually get delivered for at least 22 days. Outfront sales have very dominant peaks and valleys during the summer to correspond to the major grilling holidays. In fact, the large peak of 1,600 loads that we recently saw was predominantly for 7 million pounds of brisket and round products, which had not risen much in price during the last month, along with a limited sales of rib and loin products that were priced considerably below that week's actual spot trade, and this started to indicate a topping out for the prices. Outfront sales have been a very dominant portion of meat sales during the last decade, except the last 3 quarters have seen more hand-to-mouth buying. When you look at the quarterly graph, you can see that buyers have been more reluctant to commit to product in advance after the choice cutout began to average over 190. However, when you look at the lack of early outfront sales this year, you could see why buyers were actually forced into the spot trade to buy product for the beginning of this grilling season. Those fewer early commitments for product set up an opportunity for the big price rally, and often causes wider swings both up and down in that daily spot cutout. Box beef exports reported 981 loads, which were 316 loads less than the previous week. NAFTA exports represented 220 of those loads, and 761 loads were shipped overseas. When you look at the quarterly box beef export graph, you could see that the export volume has softened slightly since mid-2011, but this is dramatically better than 209. Keep in mind that this represents box beef exports as reported in the weekly comprehensive report, and it does not include the variety meats, and the second quarter still has several weeks to go yet this year. The important thing is to recognize is that overseas exports have escalated and the NAFTA portion of the exports have softened slightly. The most recent 10-week rolling box beef sales average was 7,002 loads per week, which compares to 7,147 loads per week last year at the same time, and was only 145 loads less than last year's average. This is the closest that we have been to last year in a long, long time. It came during the season when box beef sales really escalate every year for grilling, so it was somewhat anticipated. Also, it came at a time when we did not harvest as many steers or heifers, so we didn't have as much product to sell. The latest average national steer carcass weight has been following its normal seasonal decline all spring, but this is the time of the year that it turns the corner and starts to increase. It was 1 pound higher at 843, which compares to 841 last year and only 815 pounds for the 4-year average. This is the closest that we've been to last year in a long time, and has been driven partially by the very positive CME basis and the push to sell cattle, while it is still in favor for the feedlots when they lift their hedges. However, the weight difference had been running 8 to 15 pounds heavier during much of the last 10 weeks, which added a lot of tonnage early in the period. When you look at the steer and heifer FIS harvest numbers for the last 10 weeks, we can see that the jump quite a bit lately, but we are still running behind last year. Part of this was made up by that increase in carcass weights early in the period. Thank you. This has been Ed Czerwien with the USDA in Amarillo, Texas.